Get your win at wallacewins.com.
There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the wallacewins.com podcast. We are in studio today with a dear friend of mine and accomplished trial attorney, Mr. Brian Breiter. Welcome.
This place is amazing.
Thank you.
What a setup, dude.
Okay, but let me set you up before you start setting me up.
All right.
Let me just introduce you to the masses for all the folks that may not know you or may not know too much about you. Hopefully that'll change very quickly. Mr. Breiter is an accomplished civil trial attorney. He's a member of ABOTA, the American Board of Trial Advocates. He's been practicing law, helping injured innocent victims since 1995. Licensed in California and Florida, was nominated for Trial Lawyer of the Year 2 times by the Consumer Attorneys of Los Angeles. Surprised you haven't won it yet. Should be shortly, within the next year or two, I assume. Beyond that, uses his skills as a professional actor for over 30 years in the courtroom and in depositions like really no one else in our field, and teaches improvisational theater techniques for trial lawyers, a program called Improv for Trial with his colleague Joseph Limbaugh. And his office concentrates on wrongful death, brain injury, serious injuries, and trucking accidents, both in California and in Florida. Correct. So Brian, welcome. That's quite an intro.
That's an amazing intro. Now I get to build you up.
Okay.
This place is amazing. I took the tour, saw your courtroom.
Yes.
All the memorabilia.
Yes.
And, you know, we have something in common together.
Do share.
Improv for Trial. We did. You were one of the first firms during that COVID period to really dive in and get all of your people involved with Improv for Trial. And I thought that was amazing for you to do. And I remember having such a great time doing it. We did it for 8 weeks.
Absolutely. I can say personally, I'm a big fan of yours. And I'm happy to have you here on the podcast.
Well, I gotta say,
I think I've been bothering you about it for a little while.
No. I've been watching your podcast and getting more and more jealous as I see, you know, how great your interviewing style is and just the conversations that you have. This is great.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'm thrilled to have you here. We have a lot to talk about. But in the tradition of the wallacewins.com podcast, we can't really get into anything until we start off with rapid fire. All right, you ready? I'm going to throw out a bunch of things.
Oh boy.
And
I'm not good at improvising, so.
I know, but just quick, off the cuff, whatever comes to mind. You ready?
Ready.
All right, here we go. Rapid fire. Coolest place you've ever been?
Galapagos Islands.
Best sport to watch?
NFL football.
Movie you've seen more than any other?
Godfather 2.
Okay. Favorite time of day?
Probably lunchtime.
First band you saw live?
Twisted Sister. First concert.
Best city you've ever lived in?
Toss up. Miami, LA. Miami Beach, LA. They're both.
You got to go with one.
Miami Beach.
Best compliment you've ever received?
I was too persuasive. I got that from a juror.
Biggest pet peeve?
Pet peeves.
Most famous person you've ever met?
Al Pacino? I was his stand-in for a movie.
Wow. I see the resemblance.
Yeah.
Favorite sports team?
Miami Dolphins.
I knew that was coming. What are you listening to right now?
I'm listening to an audiobook called Outlive. I forget the doctor's name, but it's about how to live longer and live a better life from a technical medical standpoint. Fascinating.
Window or aisle seat?
Aisle.
No hesitation.
None.
Tell me.
You get aisle, and then you get the person you're traveling with, aisle.
Aisle.
Here, hey, look at this.
Right here. Someone's coming through. Oh,
It's fine.
That's okay.
Give me a second.
And that's been rapid fire.
What do I win?
You win
I want a Wallace cozy.
a continued conversation with
all right.
me.
I'll take
That's
it.
what you win. And, you know, anytime you're in studio, we're all winners.
It's Wallace wins.
Right. But speaking of wins, you are fresh off a recent big trial jury verdict victory against Uber.
Who?
In the Santa Monica courthouse.
Who was it against?
Uber.
Oh, Uber. Yeah.
Yeah, you've heard of them?
I did.
It's like a small company.
Small company.
Anyways, I actually saw on social media, you posted a $6.8 million jury verdict against Uber in Santa Monica several weeks back. And so I want to start off the conversation by just asking you some questions about the case.
Yes.
First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
Anytime you get a big verdict like that, congratulations are in order.
Thank you.
Tell our viewers just briefly kind of what the case was about.
So our client, his name is Craig, was a chubby guy growing up. He's kind of a good athlete. And he decided to change his life, become like strong and a better athlete, and dedicated his life to running. So he went from this chubby guy to this stud, ripped runner who became this elite runner who's running 5 to 7 miles a day. And he lived in, Hollywood, West Hollywood area, and was going on these runs. One day he's running at night, no shirt, just, shorts, and running through on Melrose and going through a crosswalk when a car driven by an Uber driver makes a right turn and takes him out in the crosswalk. Disputed liability, guy's running, didn't see him. And of course the defendant in that case took a really hard liability position on the case. My guy gets hit hard by the car. Of course that was disputed. Broke his collarbone, had a brief loss of consciousness, and then was taken to the hospital and stuff like that. But the real issue in the case was after his hips started to hurt. And then within months, he got diagnosed with labral tears in bilateral hips. And what we discovered was that he had a condition, not a condition, but really just the way his body was shaped. Your femoral head, when you're, the hip, it's supposed to be shaped like a ball. His were shaped kind of like eggs. And that is a condition called femoral acetabular impingement. And I didn't know this, I had no idea. 30% of the population, one of the three of us have this condition. And you can live your whole life and never know it. But somebody with FAI is more susceptible to labral tears. Of course, he was pain-free, running 7 miles a day, 29-year-old guy in the best shape of his life, completely pain-free, and then boom, this happens, lights it up, or new tears, and had to get bilateral hip surgeries after really trying to avoid it for years. Jason Snibbe did the labral repairs and osteoplasty where they had to reshape the bones. But when that happens to somebody young like that, they need a hip replacement within 5 to 7 years. That's hardcore for a young guy like that. Of course, all of this was, disputed and challenged by the defense. That was the case.
Got it. And so what was the top pretrial offer on the case?
So they did a 998 for $1 million, which was the Uber policy. There was talk about 1.5 million money, and that was it. And we said, nah, we're going to go to trial on this one.
And what was your lowest demand?
I think our official lowest demand was 4.2. And,
They should have taken it.
Well, yeah. I'm glad they didn't. I really didn't want to settle this case for many reasons. Number one, I wanted to get my client the money he deserved, and settling on a good case is not good. Try your good cases. And so, and I knew we had a good case, and I wanted to take Uber to trial. Everybody knows, at least before this, Uber didn't try cases. And I kept saying that. I know you don't try cases. And then I think they kind of figured, well, let's take Breiter to trial. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's go. And then, we know what happened.
Absolutely. And so was there anything that popped up during trial that surprised you or threw you for a loop or was kind of a curveball in terms of what you had prepared for versus how it came out?
Yes. I didn't know how good our case was.
And what do you mean by that?
My client was super shy, very shy, like an introverted guy, very bright, very nice, but I didn't know how well the evidence was going to come in. And, when I tell you it was improvised, this trial, everything was improvised. The shuffling of the witnesses, half of the defense case, more than half of the defense case came in during our case. And looking back, it was the best thing that could have ever happened. Because the way the story was getting structured was so fluid. Because, you know me, I don't like to have a script. I'd rather it be unscripted, and just the way the evidence was coming in, the case was getting better and better each day. And that was the best part. That's what threw me for a loop. How good is this case getting?
And so when you talk about improvised versus preparing in advance, can you talk about like what you really mean by that for someone that's maybe listening to you talk about doing a trial for the first time on this podcast? I assume you mean you're still preparing your case.
Oh no, sure.
So can you kind of walk us through what you mean by improvised?
Yeah, you need to know your case. You need to know the good and the bad about it. But as far as the way you're going to tell your story depends on your audience. So I'm going to tell a story different to this group. I'm going to tell a story different to this group and this group. So you can't really be like, oh, I know the order of the witnesses I'm going to do, and this is how the evidence is going to come in, until you know who your jury is, until you know who your jurisdiction is, who your judge is. And so when you show up and the curtains open, the story is going to come out differently. And so there were so many things happening in the moment and with the jurors that we were getting and the voir dire that was happening and just what was going on in the news. The fact that the week of the trial, John Oliver, I don't know if you watch that show.
Yeah.
He did a whole thing about Uber and Lyft.
Delivery drivers.
Yes, during the trial.
Right.
I was like, whoosh. And then there was a Larry David about the trial. And, the final episode where it was just so many things that were happening outside of the courtroom that were, factors in the way this story was being told. And then, of course, witnesses that were never deposed that were being called in by the defense that I turned into my best witnesses, that I had no idea who they were or what they were going to say. And, before and after witnesses too that we had never spoken to, we just kind of were like, I hope these guys are good. Just learning how to, in the moment, craft your story in a compelling way. And that's what improv is, as you well know.
Sure.
Being an expert now, because you are. I mean, I have all the video of our classes. I mean, if you go back and watch those 8 weeks, it's incredible to see the growth of all your trial lawyers. I mean, you already, had it because you've been doing this, and I think you just needed kind of names for the things you were doing. But don't you tell stories differently now?
Yeah, absolutely. The improv for trial experience was amazing from my perspective. We'll talk about that a little later. Sure. But obviously, I'm assuming penetrates all aspects of your trial practice, just in terms of it's a very holistic approach for you in terms of how you approach your cases and your clients and the storytelling. It's all intertwined.
From the second the client calls, we're using these instincts that we have now, improv instincts. But in this case, we did a focus group, and with zero, prep, just threw the client up on the witness stand, and it was the worst testimony, the worst, because he only said two things. This sucks. It's sad. That was his vocabulary. How has this been for you? It sucks. It's sad. And the jury after was, gave us great feedback. Like, he's a great guy. We love him, but he needs to really work on this. And so that was a challenge. The scariest part of this trial was, can my client do it? And then, of course, once his testimony started to come out, it was, there's so much we could talk about what happened during that trial, but there was a point where he was having like a PTSD breakdown on the stand where I legit didn't think I could go forward. I thought, all right, he's going to have a breakdown and this is it. This is the end of his testimony. And it was so powerful because, of course, after his focus group, we prepared and I said, listen, you need to be in the moment. You need to talk to these jurors. I want you to imagine this, fiber optic cable connecting our brains, and we're going to just improv through this. I did not rehearse his testimony at all. That's why when it came and it happened, it was so real that I was like, holy crap, what do we do? And, of course, we survived. But that moment was so real, I think, that the jury, and then this was the moment. I said, what do you want this jury to do? And he turned to them and he said, I want them to understand. And he looked at them and I looked at them and they were all like, wow. That was an incredible thing for him to say, because I was like, all right, I want them to treat me fair. I just want them to understand what has happened to me. And that was huge. And that was just such a real moment. And they understood.
Sure. Sounds like it.
Very powerful.
Well, congrats.
Thanks.
I mean, just a phenomenal result.
Thank you.
Kudos to you and your team, and congrats to your client.
Yeah, I have to say, Jeff Toomey, who tried the case with me, knew a BOTA member, I think the youngest BOTA member, maybe.
Oh, good. And
he was unbelievably superb. And, just support from our fellow trialers who,
Sure.
We had a packed house during the closing. Everybody, people were coming, watching the trial. It was a big deal. It was the first Uber verdict, I believe. I know for California it was. I don't even know, but nationwide maybe for a PI case, I think it was.
Yeah, you beat me to it because my Uber case is up on appeal right now.
It's not going to be the last, that's for sure.
Well, no, that's phenomenal. And, obviously you've had a lot of success in the courtroom, and that's just the most recent. But you've been doing your thing for a long time. And, we talked briefly about it, but I want to kind of dive in a little bit more on this improv for trial thing.
Sure.
I have some personal experience with it, but starting from the beginning, if, some of our viewers don't have any knowledge or experience or understanding of what that is or what you do with the improv for trial with Joseph Limbaugh, give us a kind of a brief explanation for what it is and kind of how it came to be.
Sure. Well, I'll give you a little history of me. So I was a kid actor growing up, and I even had like loose improv training as a little kid, like kid actor, commercial actor and theater and all that kind of stuff. Then when I went to law school, I started doing trial advocacy, and I realized I was like, this is theater. And I got heavily involved in improvisation. I met an improv teacher who really understood it. And that's when I said, oh, this is what I need to really hone. The legal stuff is one thing, but this is a show. And, it's kind of happening in the moment. So I started developing that. And many years ago, probably like 15, 18 years ago, I started putting this program together where just teaching the rules of improvisational theater. Everybody's heard of the Groundlings or Second City or, how you're making
whose line is it anyways?
Whose line is it anyway? Where you're taking suggestions from the audience and then, justifying it, and it looks like it's scripted. And so people hear improv and then they get scared. Oh, I can't do that. I'm gonna screw up. I'm gonna look like a fool.
Or it's gonna put me in a really embarrassing situation where I'm gonna have to start barking like a dog or doing something crazy.
That's the whole point.
Right.
Failing is okay. Don't do your best, because no matter what happens in a trial, something is going to happen unexpected.
Right.
And something is going to go wrong.
Especially from the beginning with jury selection, which is, from my experience, the most feared aspect of the trial for any attorney who's trying to learn how to become a trial attorney or prepare for the courtroom. When you're first getting into the courtroom, the jury selection process is the most, sort of daunting mentally, because you can't script what the potential jurors are going to say. And that's what drives so much fear for a lot of lawyers. Can you speak to that?
Well, first of all, you're looking at these people. You don't have a clue what these people are going to say. And then you hear the craziest stories.
Because the folks that are trying to get off the jury.
Well, not only that,
they're Googling the night before, how do I get off a jury? And then they say the most outlandish stuff possible.
I'm not worried about those people. I'm worried about the honest people that are just telling me, oh, this is what happened in my life, or who I am, or what makes me tick. Once you get them to tip my hat to Nick Rowley, be brutally honest with you and really talk to you, then you start hearing like the truth. If you can get real truth out of these people, you're like, holy crap, how do I deal with this? And we spent a lot of time in our class with your group of incredibly talented trial lawyers. You're very lucky to have the crew that you have. Status. You remember status?
Sure.
How to communicate, and we could spend months talking about status, but once you understand status and understand how to connect with jurors in a profound way, you're going to win the trial the majority of the time during this jury selection process.
Right.
And, winning is relative, obviously, but just being able to harness that and not be afraid. My favorite part of the case is jury selection. It's like, that's my dinner party. Let's go and have a cocktail hour. Right. That's really, if you approach it that way and just erase the fear.
Right.
It's natural to have fear. Improv allows you to not worry about falling off the tightrope.
Right.
And so what if something goes wrong? It's how you rebound from it.
Yeah.
And how you make it look seamless, which is the hardest part.
Sure.
And it's the best part, because once you get comfortable doing that, nothing in the trial can, except for your client saying, I'm faking it.
Right.
Is going to hurt you. And the defense really, there's very few lawyers that are capable of combating that. Very few.
Or understanding the nuance of what's going on.
Yeah, there are.
They have kind of their preset way of trying the case.
Right.
That, has worked for them over the years, but it's pretty rigid, and it's not designed to, have any type of flexibility or the ability to pivot off of what we're doing on our side.
They're by the book, we're throw the book out. That's how I approach it. And I do wacky stuff during my case.
Right.
Game shows and radio shows or puppet shows or cooking demonstrations. And in this Uber trial, I did a commercial at the end. I don't know if you heard about it. Oh.
Your closing argument?
In my closing. So, there's always I'm knocking on the door and the client opens the door and sees me. I'm from the future, I'll pay you $20 million if you go on a run and get hit by a car.
Right.
That's one approach. It works. It's good. But I did something a little bit different. I said, in my rebuttal, I said, I have a way that Uber can fix this. I stayed up all night, and it came to me, and I know how Uber can, they have Uber Eats and DoorDash and Uber and all this stuff. Uber time machine. And then I went into a commercial, which I could read for you, but it was basically, I could read it for you.
Sure.
Okay. Well, give me a second here. Hold on a second. I'll find it. Uber time machine.
I wonder if Uber's going to roll this out as a new product since you've
let's get on the
conveniently pitched it for them to a Santa Monica jury.
Let's get the IPO and do this. You ready? Yeah, ready. Introducing Uber Time Machine, the revolutionary app that transcends time. Tired of living with regrets? Wish you could rewrite history? With Uber Time Machine, now you can. Simply download the app, enter your desired destination in the past, and let our cutting-edge technology transport you back in time. Whether you want to relive your glory days, undo past mistakes, or prevent that embarrassing moment from ever happening, Uber Time Machine has you covered. Forget about being late for that important meeting or missing out on life-changing opportunities. With Uber Time Machine, time is no longer a barrier. Revisit cherished memories, right wrongs, or simply enjoy the thrill of exploring different eras. The possibilities are endless, and don't worry about disrupting the space-time continuum. Our expert team of temporal engineers ensures a smooth and seamless journey every time. So why wait? Download Uber Time Machine now and start rewriting your story today. After all, time waits for no one except for Uber Time Machine users.
I love it.
You know how much it costs to get a ride on the Uber Time Machine?
$6.8 million.
That's right. $6.8 million.
Yeah.
And so, you see the jury nodding. We also had, we did all kinds of, I had an Uber ride video from the moment he left the scene in an ambulance for the next 5.5 years. And it was an Uber ride.
Mm-hmm.
From the moment the crash happened until the day of the closing argument, and how much that Uber ride costs. And we said, there's no app. This is not a trial by AI. It's not a trial by algorithm. It's a trial by humans.
Right.
And Uber doesn't get to set the price. You do.
Yep. Empowering the jury.
Absolutely. And so, we use these. This was setting them up for this along the way. And I don't know, you've seen what I do with the illustrative drawings.
Yes.
I did that in this case. I have them. I could show them to you. Where I have an artist that basically illustrates the trial. And that's what I start my closing with, to bring the jurors right back to all that testimony by showing them the imagery. And it really connects them with, the emotional side of the case.
Sure.
Because that's really what drives,
the story.
The story. It's the up. Remember we discussed in our improv class, Up, the movie?
Right.
It's the heart. If you don't care about the person, then, what good is this money?
Right.
And it was nice. It was a great jury. I had a good jury. They were very smart. It's Santa Monica jury. They're fickle. They're not downtown juries. They're different.
Yeah. The last Santa Monica jury I had, I think there was 3 lawyers, an accountant, and a Pepperdine professor on the jury.
Yeah. I had a similar kind of panel.
Yeah. So you get educated folks and,
I had no Uber drivers in my pool.
Interesting.
I had one. I had Uber users. And they all, had their feelings, mostly bad, about Uber.
Right.
And the one driver was like, whatever. He was off for cause right away. I think it would have been a different approach if I had to do this case downtown with people who are Uber drivers.
Right.
So, again, speaking of preparing, you can't prepare for your jury. There's zero preparing for that.
Well, especially in the PI hub, the at least the remnant of it that's filtering its way through the system, where you show up for trial and you don't know where you're going to be sent. You don't know what trial judge you're getting and what venue you're getting. That makes it, I imagine, even more valuable to implement some of these improv for trial techniques, because some of the key components of preparing for trial, like what's my jury pool, who's my trial judge, those don't get thrown on you until the day of trial after 2, 3, 4, 5 years of litigation. And you have to react, and you have to pivot, and you have to make decisions quickly, and you have to strategize based on this last minute, really, really important information. Can you speak to that?
I'm going to make an analogy, because when I walk around your incredible office, I see all these sports memorabilia stuff. And, you know, I know you love sports.
Sure.
You're a big football guy. You're the coach. You're Belichick, okay? And you're watching game film and you're getting ready, right? That's what you do.
Sure.
And you have a courtroom here, and I know you do focus groups.
Yeah.
And you can focus these trials all you want. But if you don't add the rolling of the dice, the improv unknown to that process, it doesn't matter what happens when you show up and some crazy SHIT goes down that you can't plan for.
Right.
And so that's the factor. So when we do our focus groups,
it's like showing up to play the Super Bowl and they don't tell you where you're playing or, you know, who the referees are until the day of the game or something.
Right. Or instead of a football, you have a round ball. They're like, okay, you're gonna play the game with this now.
Right.
But where you've been practicing with this, doesn't matter. Figure it out. Or you're not allowed to use your hands. You know, that's ridiculous. But that's one of the exercises that we used to do. Remember?
Sure.
The no S game, the no T's. Just taking away things from us that we're so used to, that we rely on, like our words. Gibberish. We spent, 2 weeks just talking in gibberish. People don't understand it until you realize how important being able to communicate without words is.
Right.
Those types of things, those are elements of what we teach that make the story so important. And the way you communicate and the way you are delivering the message. And also, you got to see what this jury is ready for. I can't do a puppet show I couldn't do a puppet show with this jury, but I could do the Uber time machine concept with them. They were really smart. And, Santa Monica jurors are like, these lawyers aren't going to, get something by me.
Right.
They're too smart. So you got to be careful, who your audience is. And not that I could fool somebody with a puppet show. That jury was ready for that.
Yeah. You got to know your audience.
Exactly. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does. And, beyond that, how do you think your improv for trial skill set has evolved over the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years?
Well, I'm going to flip it on you first.
Okay.
What was the most valuable thing you, as the coach and leader of your team, you got from the class?
So I would say, for me personally, it was understanding some of the underlying concepts of improv, and kind of putting a name to some of the things that maybe inherently I was already doing, but understanding that there's actually a name for it and a structure behind it, and understanding what it really is, to be able to utilize it a little bit better. For me personally, I think that was a big thing. For example, the whole status thing was really eye-opening for me. From a team leader standpoint, having my attorneys at my firm go through it, I think one of the biggest benefits was being able to put my folks in uncomfortable situations and having them have to react and, get through that creates growth.
And you're in the same uncomfortable situation with them.
Right.
Which I was super impressed by. The fact that, you're the boss, you're there, but then you're playing along with them and everybody's in the same boat.
Right.
And that's scary.
Right.
But did it make you, because I saw your, the stars rising from this group. I mean, did you know even the potential that your attorneys had?
Yeah, I think so. But, I think one of the things that I think I saw was, you talk about the sports analogies, like, we always see the game-winning buzzer-beating shot, but you don't see the 100,000 shots in the gym practicing when no one's looking, right? So there's a certain element of like the reps, right? And so, focus groups is a way to get reps in, because you're not always going to be in trial.
Right. It's working out the muscles.
But you're working out the muscles. And so it creates a level of, I think, personal confidence in people that take the class where, hey, if I can survive the gibberish exercise and I can survive, the exercise where I can't use certain letters of certain words and I can survive this exercise, and I can get through that and maybe even have a little success with it, more so than I thought I was going to have going in. I think it breeds some confidence just personally in the people that went through the class to say, well, if I can get through that, then I can get through,
anything.
A call where a defense attorney is, trying to grill me on this, or I'm a oral argument on a hearing where a judge is questioning me on that, or, all these different, confrontational scenarios that we find ourselves in the practice of law that many times, the difference between successful attorneys and less successful attorneys is experience and having been through the fire and having seen things along the way and having those reps under your belt. So I think it creates a confidence that, you kind of have this Teflon layer of like, it doesn't really matter what gets thrown at me, I can handle it. And so I think I think I saw that from my team a little bit coming out of the class.
So to answer your question, over the last 10, 15 years, how was it? I literally, this is my improv show. So, I've been doing improv shows for 30 years, getting up and doing improvisation. This is an improv show for me. And the suggestion is my client's case. Okay, and we're going to do it. And I have somebody, by the way, one of the other attorneys with me, who's also an expert in improv, because we speak this now secret language together. And then we teach the techniques to our clients too.
Right.
And, the experts also need to understand, how to connect with jurors. And that's what I've learned is I'm not afraid anymore. I used to be when I would get the flop sweat and all that stuff. But now it's just, okay, this is, there's very high stakes, but
Sure.
I know going in, like, there's no situation I can't justify or resolve. Of course, it's going to be up to 12 jurors to see whether they
Right.
believe in our case, but I know the way we're going to tell the story is going to be the most impactful story we can tell.
Yep, absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right, well, with that, we're going to segue into another segment of the podcast that we like to call Underrated, Overrated. And this is where I throw out a list of topics,
Oh boy.
and you tell me whether they're underrated or overrated, and a brief explanation why.
All right.
Ready?
Ready.
SoCal weather.
Overrated. I love this new weather now. This new weather, the old SoCal weather of sunny all the time. No, I like now rain. Now it's improvisational. I don't know when it's going to rain now. It might rain all the time.
FaceTime calls.
Underrated. Yeah, they're great. Those are awesome.
Love it. Ranch dressing.
Overrated. I'm a blue cheese guy all the way. Yeah, or even like, oil and vinegars.
Shopping in person at the store.
It's underrated. My parents owned a men's clothing store. I understand the need to, touch and see and try on, and that's the shopping experience for me. Very important. You can't buy shoes on the internet. Buy shoes on the internet.
I mean, I buy shoes off my Nike app all the time. Sneakers, drops, cop the new Kobe's.
Underwear. That's as far as I can go.
Postmates.
I was very sick last week, and I used Instacart for like the first time. I loved it.
Yeah.
I needed it. I couldn't get out of the house. It was delivered to me.
Very convenient.
Yeah, I like it.
So underrated.
Yeah, I guess so.
Chat GPT.
Awesome. Love it. It's underrated.
Agreed.
That's helped me with the Uber time machine, by the way. I got to give some credit to ChatGPT.
It helps with everything.
It's helping. I'm ChatGPTing right now.
Yeah. I actually came up with these lists of underrated, overrated topics from ChatGPT with a little help from them.
Sure.
Then
It's
I
great.
Revised it a little bit. It's not plagiarized from.
Yeah.
Yeah. We didn't file a brief in New York with fake case sites. The snooze button.
Underrated. I snooze.
You're a snoozer.
I snoozed this morning. I don't typically snooze. I'm up.
I
like
also
that.
snoozed this morning.
Well,
I was
just
mad
one
at
snooze.
myself, though.
One snooze. One snooze is nothing.
Side hustles.
Underrated. I mean, improv for trials, my side hustle. Got to have a side hustle. You can't be just one thing. Side hustles are great.
I agree. Starbucks.
Overrated.
I could tell your immediate reaction, your face,
Coffee snob.
yeah.
Sleeping
more than 7 hours.
That's underrated. If you can find that, do it. Sleep is so important. I used to have terrible sleep. I couldn't fall asleep, and then I wasn't getting the hours. And during trial, as you know.
Very difficult.
Very hard. You can get 8 hours. That's gold. Gold.
Inflation.
I don't know.
Just pick one.
Overrated.
Inflation's overrated. All right. Well, thanks to ChatGPT, that has been underrated, overrated.
That whole segment, underrated.
This podcast guest, underrated. See what I did there?
Yeah. It's a callback. That's an improv technique.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a name for it.
Status, also some
Just
status.
felt right.
Status was going on there.
Right.
You elevated my status.
That was great.
I said yes and.
I know. It's like two mouths with one brain. It's at this point. We're melded together.
Yeah. We're like conjoined trial attorneys.
Right.
That would be a great improv game.
It would be.
Conjoined twins doing a closing argument.
Right.
I smell a improv exercise in our future.
One person gives the close verbally. The other one has to do the hand gestures.
Two
and
lawyers.
Facial expressions.
2 lawyers, 1 jacket. Get it? Standing there. 1 tie. Our 2 heads together. That's a thing.
That could be a thing.
Do you think a judge would allow it?
Although if we went too far, we'd probably end up with no client.
Do you think a judge would allow that? If the one lawyer is just not speaking, I'm going to try that.
I don't know.
I try that in my next trial.
Depends who the judge is, I think.
This last judge, by the way, the best, Michael Lavanis.
Shout out, Judge Lavanis.
I got to give him a shout out. He was an exceptional trial judge. Fantastic. Just great demeanor, understanding of the law, kind person, like legit kind person. That also is a big factor.
Yeah, it makes a difference.
Huge. There's a lot of judges out there that people don't love for good reason.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of judges out there that, in my opinion, for both sides, makes trying a case in their courtroom way more difficult than it needs to be. And sometimes, I feel like they're just sort of exacting their pound of flesh on the attorneys.
Well, that goes straight into our improv thing. When we do our focus group, we have, let's do version with nice judge. Now let's do version with worst judge ever.
Right.
You got to be prepared for both.
You sure do. You sure do. Especially if you're coming out of the PI hub and you don't know what you're going to get.
Exactly.
All right. Well, you have other attorneys in your office that are helping you on cases and doing trials with you. Some are on the younger side. What is your best advice for attorneys looking to get more experience in the courtroom?
Well, try cases. Try your good cases if you can. That's hard to do when you're young because they start offering you money and it's tempting to just, take it, and then you're never going to get that big verdict because you're giving away your good case for some instant gratification money, which...
But let's say, obviously what you're saying is correct, but let's say, for example, you have like a younger attorney.
Oh, you mean at my firm, or I'm talking about just some
in general for any
young attorney out there who's starting their own practice?
Yeah, or maybe they're starting their own practice. Maybe they're working at a firm underneath a more experienced attorney. And certainly those scenarios are going to create different pieces of advice, I imagine. But what are some of the things that you think younger attorneys should be doing to try to get more courtroom experience in this day and age of where the practice is at?
Demand it. I want to try cases. You have to listen. You're a boss, right? Yeah. If a lawyer came up to you from your firm and said, "Listen, I want to try some cases. Give me 3 cases that I will try this year." Are you going to do it?
Of course.
Okay. So if you don't ask for that opportunity, you're not going to get it. And if you're on your own, you have to just say, "I'm going to try X amount of cases, no matter what." And then, it's find that client who's going to be a willing participant,
right,
and let you do it. Or put yourself out there and start asking people to let you try their cases. There's a young lawyer who shares a suite in our office. Name is Asher Hoffman. And he's, did the Abota trial school. And he's a brilliant kid. He's going to be a superstar lawyer. He's already tried 3 cases in his first year. And because he's hungry and he wants to do it.
Sure.
And he's going to be an Abota member soon.
Yeah.
Because he wants to just be trying cases. And you got to ask for it.
What about the approach of bringing in when, let's say you're a younger attorney and you have a big case and you're bringing in kind of a more established veteran trial attorney to partner up with.
Yeah.
Is that also a good opportunity for a younger attorney to, kind of second chair that case? And
100%. I mean, there's the model of, look, I'm a mill firm, I get cases, I just want to send it out, tell me what the verdict is. There's that. Mm-hmm. Or there's attorneys that want to be part of it so that when they put it up on their website, they can legit say, I was part of that verdict, not just I gave it to Brad or I gave it to Brian to try the case for me.
Right.
I actually did it. So, when I get called from attorneys, I'm like, do you want to be there with me? Let's go. I'll teach you all these skills. I'll make you part of the process. Let's do it together.
Right.
That's a great way to be in it. Because if you're going to bring me the case, I expect you want to be a part of it. And if you don't, that's fine too. Come and watch. I would hope, at least, if you're referring me this case and we're going to trial, you're going to come watch it. Because, you have a vested interest in it. But certainly, I'm all about having someone. And if they're going to second chair, by the way, I don't call it second chair. I call it co-piloting.
Right.
Because, sometimes I got to rest or just watch, observe. I like doing half or less of the trial.
Yep.
So like Toomey in this last case, he did so much. He did all of the defense witnesses, all of them. That's a lot of responsibility. And he did some of the plaintiff case too, and did the open. That's a lot of work to do. And he was brilliant at it.
Yep.
And it allows, it's like having offense and defense. You can't play both sides. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
So
all the trials we do are team efforts.
Yeah, we have 2, sometimes 3 attorneys in a trial.
Same. Now, when we talk about your improv for trial class that you've developed over the years, it's to teach improvisational theater techniques for trial lawyers.
Correct.
Currently, what are the typical types of lawyers that contact you that have interest in the program?
Okay. First of all, I mainly teach it to plaintiff attorneys.
Okay.
Except recently, we taught a group of 25 lawyers from a probate firm.
Interesting.
Okay? And they're not typically in trial. And they were, after teaching the class, Joseph and I looked at each other and we're like, wow, this was incredible because how useful it was for them. And
why did they go down the road of signing up for the class? What was it that they thought was going to be beneficial for their practice?
I think they had no idea what it would do. And that was the best part. They were open to it, and it allowed them to, A, learn the secret language together, and allowed them to, because they're still telling stories. You know, he was one of the fascinating stories I got from that class. So probate, they had, you had a case where there were 2 brothers that were fighting over this huge estate. And the brothers were like burning through the estate because they were going at war with each other. And we found out through it that at the mediation where they were trying to settle the matter, that one brother was mad at his other brother because when they were 7 and 9, the one brother pushed his brother off a boat. And it was this trauma for him.
He just held this grudge.
For all these years. And when they figured out like that's what it was, and they were able to resolve the case. And that led us into this whole discussion.
The one brother got the boat, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly. But it resolved it. I mean, it was a status war between them. And again, if you don't know what status is, this is kind of like a weird concept, but for them to approach the way they tell the story of their client and how to resolve things and just getting information from their clients, learning how to talk to them and extract information, building trust, all those, things that you learn during our process was super valuable to them. They still, of course, they do trials and they tell stories. A lot of them are bench trials, but still with a judge, they're humans.
Yeah.
I don't care what they say, because I did a bench trial with Chance Bardone, great trial lawyer, and we did our thing, during the bench trial. And after, the judge was like, Mr. Breiter, you don't have to do all this razzle dazzle. Meanwhile, we got a great result. They don't know what's influencing their decision. It works.
Right.
You're still having a human interaction, even with a judge, especially with a judge, because they've seen it all. And when I do my jury trials, the judges are usually like entertained by this, and in those cases, they're not the decision maker. But again, when they're the decision maker and they see this stuff going on, they don't want to feel like they're being, influenced by the performance of the attorneys. Absolutely they are. I mean, you have to feel whether your audience is buying what you're doing.
Right.
But I think it's a great factor. I don't know where this answer came from or what.
No, it's great. It's just about trying to, I was just trying to dig in for you, like what you're seeing in terms of the types of attorneys that are coming through that have an interest in developing this skill set.
I think every attorney, young or old, experienced or brand new, should be at least experimenting with this. I'm going to Gary Dordick's trial college in a couple weeks. There's going to be super experienced attorneys there like yourself. I mean, when you did it, then you've been like kind of, wow, this is cool stuff.
Yeah.
And you can learn from it. And we always have to be learning. And
well, that's what I was going to say. It's interesting because in my experience in our profession, in our industry, it's kind of a little bit of a misnomer to say, oh, an experienced trial attorney or an inexperienced trial attorney, because what I've found is the best trial attorneys are the ones who are constantly pushing themselves to learn and grow and continue to develop and aren't like set in a specific way of doing it. And then they say, oh, that's it. I'm locked in it, and so a lot of these trial skills type classes, when you talk about your improv for trial, or you talk about, Nick Rowley's Trial by Human workshops, or you talk about, Jerry Spence, the ranch, the whole, Spence method.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of others, there's Keith Mitnick,
Lanier,
Don't
Eat the Bruises.
Don't Eat the Bruises,
Mm-hmm.
Mark Lanier. You got, Dan Ambrose doing case analysis, Trojan Horse, all that stuff. TLU, exactly. It's not just for new lawyers. It's for
all lawyers,
experienced, well-accomplished trial attorneys that, continue to push themselves to get better and to learn new techniques and to understand themselves better and help them understand their clients better.
How about unlearning bad habits?
Right.
Well, times have changed. I don't know. Have you realized times have changed?
I heard that.
Yeah. People now their attention spans are different. They expect different experiences when they show up. Now I do close to 50% of my stuff electronically, meaning I'll have remote testimony, I'll have video deposition testimony, which is absolutely better than in-person testimony in certain situations.
Right. Well, and to your point, in terms of people's attention spans, it's also just evolved in terms of the way that people consume information. It's faster, it's more soundbite driven, it's more, like this
visually.
This podcast is going to get clipped out and little excerpts blasted all over social because maybe 1 out of 20 people will actually sit and watch the entire, hour-long episode.
You better watch the whole thing.
You better be watching. But that's just the way that people are consuming information nowadays.
Listen,
and so
when you get that box of chocolates, do you eat every chocolate at once? No, you get sick.
Do you want me to admit that?
No.
On tape? No.
You have a bite, you enjoy it, and then you go back to it. It's hard to, absorb it all at one point because, we have other things going on. We're distracted. And that's happening in a trial as well. And so that's why I love it when defense does their case during my case. It's kind of like when you watch a movie and there's flashbacks or flash forwards.
Right. Like Pulp Fiction.
Yes. Different perspectives, Rashomon, kind of different ways of perspective during the storytelling. I think it's great. And so, just learning that there's different ways of approaching the structure of the trial. It's turning it upside down. And, because the other side is playing by the book and we're throwing the book out.
And obviously when I did the improv for trial class, it was in the midst of the great pause, the COVID era. So we did Zoom.
You know what I'm going to do right now? I'm going to
interrupt my question.
I'm going to interrupt your question right now and invite you, because we never got to do it in person. Just bring your crew back and we're going to do one reunion class in person. That's my gift to you.
And that was going to be my question, which is, I understand you have in your office space now a built out kind of theater space where you can run in-person improv classes.
Yes.
So how much of what you're doing right now with your improv for trial is that in-person piece at your office versus still doing some stuff over Zoom?
So we teach attorneys across the country. Mm-hmm. So we had, in our last class, we had 2 from Ohio, 2 from Connecticut, 2 from California, 1 from Minnesota, all in one Zoom class. Mm-hmm. Yours, we had because it was during COVID, everybody from LA. So obviously, if they're across the country, we're doing that by Zoom.
Sure.
But people in LA now can come to the theater, and it's just a different experience to do it in person. I prefer in person, quite frankly, because you can do different exercises that you can't do on Zoom. But the Zoom class also it's very intimate, because when you see yourself on the big screen, there's something about that too. It's tight. Your facial expressions become even more subtle.
Right. You almost have a mirror right in front of your face.
And so, they're both great, but I'd love to hear your experience after you come in live and we do it in person versus the improv that we did.
And I imagine the in-person thing also has a transference of a lot of, relevancy to trial practice, being in a courtroom, being up on your feet in front of folks, sort of that in-person interaction that you can't mimic or recreate on Zoom.
Well, you can move around the room and use your body using space work,
Right.
You've seen me ever do this? You know what this is? My mind eraser. I use this on jurors all the time. Erase their brain. Did that work? Did your experience go away after I erased your brain?
No.
Just doing space work, which we teach in the in-person class. You can't really do it on Zoom. It's weird. You can.
I'm sorry. Who are you again? You just erased.
It
have
worked.
You been here before?
Yeah. Let me
I need to call security. There he is. He's
back.
Brian. He's back. He's back. Yeah, no, it sounds like, there's benefits to both.
Oh, absolutely.
But are you leaning into the in-person thing now that we're
doing
getting back
this
to it?
Sunday. We're a firm is coming and we're doing a boot camp, like an all-day thing. All their lawyers are coming. Also, it's not just for lawyers; it's support staff too. And we're doing an 8 hours boot camp instead of doing the 8-week class for them. They may do that. But then we have another structure that we do over 1 or 2 days. You know Daryl Isaacs? The Hammer?
I know of him, yeah.
The Kentucky Hammer?
Right.
Brian? He flew me and Joseph out, and we did a 2-day program for them. That was unbelievable. They have a courtroom, actually very similar to yours, and they were fantastic. And so, we could do it over a 1-day period, over a 2-day period. Mm-hmm. Like Rex Paris. That's very funny. I'll just tell you. 15 years ago, when Kale was like just a little kid, I went to Rex's house and we taught improv for trial way back.
Wow.
And then jumped to last year, where now he's got 25 attorneys.
Yeah. And
we taught a boot camp for them over 2 days, which was unbelievable. And it's just a great, it's team building. Also, it's great networking too, because imagine if you have 8 or 10 different lawyers from different firms or practices, you're connecting. And then you're also, we discuss cases during the class as well. There's an offshoot of Improv for Trial, which is, improvise your trial, where we do improvised trials. You bring us your case like, hey, Brian, let's do a focus group. It's not really a focus group. It's an improvised trial where we improv themes and ideas and come up with story for that particular case versus trying to convince a group of, potential jurors what this case is about.
Right.
It's developing the themes and the stories.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Through improv.
Through improv is 100%. Like we find out the story in the moment, and then we're like, holy crap. Like the jury loved that, or the jury's like, don't do that.
Interesting.
That's very powerful.
So you do that with mock jurors?
Correct. And we get feedback. We have a moderator and we have closed caption TV. And we're like, well, what did you think of this? Like, how would this change? And then we'll come back in and do it.
Interesting.
Everybody comes back into the room. The jury's there. And now we redo. And they're like, oh, that was much better. Or that was, go back to the other version. Whatever. I mean, you're doing an improv. You have an audience there. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's like when you do a test audience for a film. How would you like to have seen the hero do this? Did you ever go to one of those?
I have not, but
they're fascinating because, you know, I'm in the business. Where you would go and you'd watch a film and then they give you a thing, you fill it out like, did you like this story element? And then they invite you back and show you the recut.
interesting.
It's fascinating. I mean, you're just reworking the story.
Right.
That's different than a focus group like, here's the evidence, because the evidence isn't going to change. It's
Right.
the way you tell the story of the evidence, how you present it.
Absolutely. So in those situations, the mock jurors know the role of the attorney is representing the plaintiff.
Well, we tell them.
And they're just...
They don't know which side necessarily. We don't tell the jurors, like, we're both from this same firm. You know, we just tell them this is a real case. And
Oh, you give them both sides, though?
oh, absolutely.
Okay.
100%. Have to. It's more for the client, too. I mean, you know, like in this last case, Craig was so freaking shy. I wanted to see the worst version of him. I wanted to see the unpolished diamond version of his testimony. And they still loved him.
Right.
But the jurors, like, I actually had people from the focus group, it's the first time this ever happened, write me an email that said, we love your case. This is what you need to do. 2 people did that. And I was like, wow, they really were invested.
Right.
That after they left and got their check and their bag of chips and water, they still cared to write to us to say, you know, when I left, I really thought that's crazy. That's awesome that they did that. And that was very powerful, very helpful.
Very cool.
I have a question for you.
Yeah. Shoot.
Underrated, overrated, improv for trial.
Underrated. That was a softball.
It was. It's a callback.
Underrated, overrated. This podcast.
Underrated.
Softball.
Softball.
What advice would you give to your 18-year-old self? Other than don't use the Uber time machine, or maybe do use.
I would use the Uber time machine. What would I guess drink more milk and eat more meat and get taller. I don't know that I would. What advice could I give myself at 18? I mean, I don't know that I would change much.
Okay.
For me, I kind of liked the path and discovered it along the. What advice would I give?
Let me change.
Hug my parents.
Let
more.
me change.
Tell my parents, which I did anyway. I mean, that kind of stuff.
All right. Let me change the question a little bit.
All right, go ahead.
What have you learned later in life that you wish you knew when you were younger?
Just listening better and being really just connected and in the moment and just listening, being a better listener. That was hard to do. And that's part of what the improv really, as I became a better improviser, I became a better listener, and that transformed everything. Being a better listener is critical. You know, most times people are waiting for the other person to shut up so they can start speaking.
Right.
And listening is so powerful.
Yeah, agreed. What is some advice that you can give to folks who agree with what you're saying, but are, you know, kind of need some practical application as to how to become a better listener?
Is this a softball? Take improv for trial? I mean, you just gotta get out of your comfort zone. You gotta do something that you would never, you know, it's like taking a painting class or guitar lessons. You want to learn a new skill, you got to go and practice it and, you know, do it. You got to do it. You got to practice. You got to get the reps.
Right.
You got to get your 10,000 hours. It's very hard to get 10 trials. You want to be an ABOTA member, right? How hard is it to get 10 trials these days?
Yeah, it's difficult.
Want to be a trial lawyer? It's hard to try cases, you know, we reported yesterday with 2 cases ready for trial, come back, you know, in 2 weeks, come back in 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's hard to get a courtroom in LA right now.
I mean, so you better be working out and honing your skills, because when you do, you're going to show up and you're going to be, you know, fat and out of shape.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think the active listening thing is great advice.
What?
Exactly.
It's everything.
It really is.
It's everything. If you're not listening, you're not learning, you're not in the moment, you're missing critical information.
Right. Well, and what you just touched on it. I really think it's about learning how to be in the moment. Right. And you also touched on it earlier, like most people are waiting for the other person to finish so that they can start saying what they have in their mind ready to say. But it's even more than that. I think that people, at least me personally, something that I used to do a lot more than I do now is I would go into a situation trying to have it all sort of like scripted out ahead of time versus being able to be in the moment, listen, and then react based on what's going on versus having some preset idea in your mind of the way that you want it to go. And I think that's where folks sometimes have difficulty with the active listening piece. For example, when you talk to attorneys that have a huge fear of jury selection, it's like, well, what if a juror says this, or what if they say that, or right?
You know where it comes from?
They're trying to do the whole script in their mind before they walk in, which is never going to work in any scenario in life.
Why? What's the fear? Lack of control.
Right.
And we are terrified of not having control.
Well, and I think it's even deeper than that, because the fear of not having control comes from, in my opinion, the fear of somebody feeling like they're going to be exposed because they don't really know who they really are themselves.
It's the fear of the unknown. And so when you're getting new information, instead of being afraid of it, because it's so empowering. Because imagine if you shared something like really and made yourself very vulnerable and shared something with me. And then I just ignored it and moved on to another point, right? Versus completely dug in and continued that conversation.
Right.
And explored
especially
it.
After you've invited them to be brutally honest with you.
Right. Well, you can't invite people to be brutally honest if you're not going to be brutally listening to their honest
Well, and I think
story.
that's where a lot of attorneys run into issues in the courtroom.
Yeah.
Is because they're asking for brutal honesty because they've read Nick Rowley's books and heard his audio tapes and watched him on CVN and watched other attorneys like yourself. And then, but they get in there and they don't really want the brutal honesty, right? They don't want it.
Yeah.
They're saying it out of their mouth. I want you to be brutally honest, but they don't really want the brutal honesty because they're not prepared to connect in that way.
The bad jurors are my favorite gifts.
Yeah.
We talked about it in the improv class.
Absolutely.
All this information is gifts. Remember we did the gift giving, the gift exchange exercise, right?
I mean, vaguely, it's been a few years. You got to.
Okay, where we're saying, okay, we're going to do an exercise where I'm giving you a gift.
Okay.
And I'm describing what I'm giving to you. Here, Brad, I got you this amazing gift. It's a miniature snow globe of you and me in a podcast.
Wow. That is one of the most unique gifts anybody has ever given me.
Yeah, shake it.
You
see that?
Oh, wow.
Wow. It's the Rams colored confetti coming down.
Wow. I don't even know. Where do you get one of these made?
It was custom.
And how did you know I was going to be wearing this blue sweatshirt?
I knew. I know you. Versus this. Brad, I got a gift for you.
Oh, wow. This is amazing. This is a gavel.
Right. Yes.
With my firm's name on it.
Yes. And
the total amount of verdicts that we obtained last year in jury trials.
Look at the size of it's a huge, It's a huge gavel.
I mean, I could barely hold it.
And it's made of pure
14 karat gold, which, I mean, we all know the price of gold has skyrocketed. I mean, how did you even afford this?
Yeah, you know, I had to dig in. So, which is harder? For some people, receiving and justifying the information they got, or for some people, being forced to, on the spot,
think of something.
And that's what jury selection is. You're getting a gift. You don't know what it's going to be.
Right.
And what if I took your gift and I was like, nah, this sucks, and I smashed it.
Right.
And or
thanks so much, just put it down and dismiss it.
That's that exercise is, and you know, we develop it a lot more.
Right.
Is jury selection. Mm-hmm. A juror shares some information with you and then you discount it or shit all over it. You know, even bad news is a gift. Thank you for sharing that with me. I appreciate that you hate trial lawyers.
Yeah. And also the net effect of dismissing the first juror who accepts your invitation to be brutally honest is that it is a total put off for the rest of the panel. They're like, oh, this guy really doesn't want me to be brutally honest. He just totally snowed over that last one. I'm not going to say anything. This isn't worth my time. Versus if they see that you honor that juror by accepting that gift and engaging with them, even if the information they're giving theoretically is bad for your case or bad for your client or negative or being perceived negatively by others, there's a lot of equity that gets gained when you honor that information and the rest of the panel feels empowered to give you their brutal honesty as well.
I'll remind you of this story that Joseph Limbaugh tells during our class, that he was in a class, an improv class, where they did this gift-giving exchange exercise. And then the teacher said, okay, I want you to go home. I want you to make a gift and bring it to class for your partner. And so people made these extravagant gifts and like, you know, piece of art or cake, and they gave it to the other person. He says, okay, I want you to take your gift and I want you to destroy it in front of the person. And people were crying and like, you know, had a miserable experience. It's like taking a gift that someone really, you know, spent a lot of time and made themselves vulnerable and gave to you, and then you destroy it. Versus, you know, really accepting it, whether you like it or not. And I'm not saying exploit it, but explore it. Because you get so much more value from it.
Right.
And, you know, it's a very cruel exercise to do, but it shows how powerful it is to listen to the other person you're in a scene with.
And how powerful it is to reject. On the other side.
Absolutely. To reject something that somebody shares with you it's very cruel.
Yeah. And, you know, a lot of times attorneys are doing that not even intentionally. They're not intentionally trying to be cruel. They're just so nervous and they can't get out of their own headspace that they fumble the bag or they move on because they think, oh, if I ask this juror any more questions, this potential juror, you know, things are going to go off the, you know, so it's.
I'm sure we both
There's so many unintended consequences of not honoring that.
I'm sure we had this same experience, just getting our feet in trials, where we used to argue with potential jurors. Do you remember ever doing that?
Yeah, in the beginning when you're trying cases and you don't really understand the nuance and the technique.
Why am I fighting with this person? Why? I'm never going to change their mind.
Or asking them leading questions. Well, isn't it true your opinion would change? You know.
Once I adopted this, and then when I used the mind eraser, it's like, look, can I change who you are now? Right. Then that's the gift.
Yeah, it's you embrace that.
And you get your cause. You get your cause challenge.
And you not only embrace it, but you cull that information as much as possible. You pull it out, keep pulling it out. And then who else feels like juror number 3?
So what hallmark of improvisation is that? Yes, and.
Right.
That's what we're teaching. That's the gift giving, is the exchange of information, saying yes instead of, once you say no in a scene, scene's over. And just to understand that jury selection for me is an improv game of how much are you willing to share? Because the more you're willing to share, the more we know whether this is the right case for you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you'll admit at the end of this conversation that this is not the right case for you, I've won, right? Because
we've done a service for our client.
Absolutely.
Because it's not the right case for them.
That's right. You're not right for this case. You can't be fair in this. You might be a fair person, but
Right.
not in this case. And that's because we've gained their trust by listening to them, whether they're not bad people.
No.
There might be some bad people, but for the most part, the vast majority they just see the world differently. And whether they'll, there's also things, this is more advanced stuff, but like masks and people wear masks all the time, revealing those, and we wear masks
Mm-hmm.
and showing them, revealing information at the right time. It's all story technique, and improv is all part of that.
Yeah.
And bringing that into the courtroom, can you imagine coming in with this superpower? I use it all the time. This is what makes me who I am, and I've devoted my practice to employing these techniques.
Yeah,
and it works for me.
It certainly does. No, and it works for you, and it works for anybody who is employing it for themselves, right? Like, in other words, I wouldn't be successful in deploying improv for trial techniques if I walked into a courtroom trying to be Brian Breiter.
No,
you have to, and that's where I said earlier, like, a lot of this comes down to, even just the act of signing up for a class like this is being humble enough in your own sense of self to say, I don't know everything. And there's things that other folks are doing that I'd like to learn a little bit more about that might enhance my trial practice, my relationship with my clients, my relationships in my life, my family relationships, my friends, the way I interact with people when I go out on a day-to-day basis. If I'm grabbing a coffee at Starbucks.
Starbucks is overrated.
No, I know. That's for me though.
Sure.
I still drink Starbucks. I don't have a fancy machine in my house like you. But my point is, the folks that are coming at it from the perspective of always trying to learn and grow and build, I think are the ones that also have that aspect of their personality where they're humble enough to admit that they don't know everything.
I'm going to do a big callback. You asked me the most interesting place. I just this week came back from the Galapagos Islands.
Mm-hmm.
Evolution. As trial lawyers, we are evolving based on the information and stimulus that is coming from around us.
Right.
And if we're not willing to evolve, we'll be extinct, because this new version of trial lawyer will come and surpass you.
Right.
You cannot be the dinosaur. You can't. You have to evolve. And that comes with learning and trying and,
Putting yourself out there.
survival of the fittest.
Yep.
Evolution of species. It's Darwinism in the courtroom. If you're still drawing on butcher paper versus doing a PowerPoint or a puppet show, that's evolution of how we're telling stories. And the medium has changed, right? Zoom.
The juror attention span has changed. The way that jurors consume information has changed.
Hello. Millennials are completely different than boomers or Gen X. You have to understand and evolve with that audience. You're going to have a mixed audience, right? So you have to be able to tell it maybe 4 different ways to that group of 12.
Right. Tapping into different types of jurors on the panel.
I mean, really, when you think about it, you take 12 people and you have just socially different, age-wise different, culturally different.
Occupationally different, socioeconomically different.
And status. Remember, status isn't about how much money you make or your position in society. It's the way you behave, right? Remember, you can have a high status hobo or a low status billionaire, CEO of a company. It doesn't matter. It's just understanding how to talk to those types of people.
Right.
That's why people who are status masters can infiltrate different groups and talk to them differently.
Right. What comes to mind is the character that Tom Hanks played in Catch Me If You Can. He was a real guy. He was like the ultimate con artist. I mean, it was back in the 60s or 70s or whatever, but he ended up,
Was it Leonardo DiCaprio?
Yeah. Tom Hanks was the guy that was chasing him.
Yes.
But the guy was the master of status because he would walk into a room and he'd have a pilot's uniform on. And,
right. That's right. Yes, absolutely.
Frank Abernathy or something like that was the guy's name, I think.
I got to rewatch that movie.
Yeah. Johnny Carson had him as a guest, like in real life.
Oh.
There's some footage on YouTube I've seen.
Really?
Years ago.
I didn't know.
He was telling some stories, like real stories.
Wow. I'm going to go look that up.
Yeah.
The people who are...
Or like, for example, not to cut you off, but recently UFC had their big UFC 300.
Mm-hmm.
And there was some footage of Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, in one of the locker rooms with one of the fighters. It was like he's a MMA fan and whatever, but he's kind of sheepishly standing off to the side. And I was thinking to myself, like, that's not the same Mark Zuckerberg that walks into a Facebook boardroom meeting as the boss, right?
Yeah.
He's like this little wimpy guy on the side, and there's all these like professional MMA guys, but he was playing his role in that moment. That's kind of the status thing. Shifting
status. You remember those exercises that we did, those shifting status where people become equal and then they surpass. And
right.
It's fascinating. Once you understand the idea of that, it gives you a tremendous amount of power. You become, I don't want to say a chameleon, but it allows you to change. Allows you to change the environment and the power structure.
Right.
It's all about, elevating status. You want to elevate jurors. You want to maybe sometimes, bring someone's status down a peg. It's important to be able to do. And once you learn, it takes years to master that.
Yeah.
And it took me many years to even understand it. Joseph has been tremendous in helping me and helping me teach it. Because we use this Keith Johnstone method that you learned of understanding status and teaching improv, which is different than like Groundling style or Second City or UCB or IO. It's very that, impro style of grounded reality.
So in your mind, where does improv for trial go from here? What's the next step for, the platform, the program, the teaching, the methodology? What do you have in mind?
Well, we have a book.
Okay.
That's almost done. Joseph has been working really hard, taking all of the teaching that we do together and then the stories of how I've used these techniques throughout the years and incorporating
Practical
them,
examples.
practical examples. Because see, look, our class, as you know, is not me just telling war stories. It's active.
Yeah, you're on your feet. You're doing
The
the
whole
exercisers.
And so I think the book could be a good, I don't know, Bible, if you will, of how these techniques can, change the way you approach trials. But there's nothing that's going to replace the actual learning and doing it. Anybody could take, and everybody should take, some kind of improv training.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the way improv for trial is different is the type of improv we teach, number one. Number two, your improv teacher is also a 30-year ABOTA trial lawyer.
Right.
So it's not like
it's geared towards the specific
it is
area of practice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I'm not knocking other improv programs. You should. Like if you live outside of LA and you can only do the Zoom class, go and take an improv class where you live. It's going to be a different experience.
The difference is someone comes to your class and they say, I'm a trial lawyer. You say, oh, great, welcome. You go to just a random improv and you say, I'm a trial lawyer. They go, oh, okay, well, so what are you doing here? It's not tailored specifically for.
Correct. Correct. And there are
you have the same things you can take away from it, but you're going to be extrapolating and you're going to be.
Yeah. I don't know other ABOTA level, trial lawyers that have done 20,000 improv shows over the years. I mean, it's a difference. And it's just unique, our experience. And so I think it's exciting. I'm so excited for Sunday. Like I'm jonesing to teach a class because the experience is very intimate. It's a very intimate experience, and it's fun too. And like you laugh so hard, little pee might come out.
Well, yeah, and I will say, just for anybody watching, in the experience that I had working with Brian was also up on his feet in the class, doing the exercises. So I imagine when you say I'm teaching a class, also for you, it's just more opportunity for you to do more improv.
Oh, by the way, if it wasn't for the 2 years of doing improv for trial online, and then starting trials again, I would have been like terrified. But because I had been doing it literally every day, 2 years teaching this class, once trials started up again, I was like, I feel great. I'm so excited.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. And I would say the cases that I've tried since I've done the improv class.
Your baseball case.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah, we did a lot of stuff in that trial. But just I think overall that combined with running a lot more focus groups in my practice now than I did in the past, having the courtroom and really utilizing it for the advantage of my cases. Those two things I think have been really big over the last 2 years in being a lot more comfortable in the courtroom, a lot more comfortable in my own skin, a lot less nervous about the quote unquote unknowns that you're going to get in any trial, and has helped bring a lot more success over the last couple of years with trial practice.
Well, you feel at home.
Yeah.
You have an octagon here.
Right.
So when you step in, it's like, oh, it's my backyard.
Right. Right. And so, it's just another tool in the toolbox, but you got to keep humbling yourself, keep learning, keep growing, which is one thing I really respect about you that, obviously you've had a lot of success, but you're continuing to put your money where your mouth is. You're continuing to give back and teach attorneys everything that you've developed over the years. There's lawyers out there that have developed techniques and then they just kind of keep it for themselves, but you're out there really trying to spread the love and get people on board. So I respect that. And
I want to be a cult leader for improv. I mean, that's really my dream.
Yeah, I don't see why you couldn't do that.
No.
Sign up for Brian's Improv for Trial cult at the link below.
Mm-hmm. Free Kool-Aid.
Free to register, takes a lifetime
To master.
to unsubscribe.
Oh, yes. Very funny.
Thank you.
I admire everything you do. This is mind-blowing to come and see your setup here. Anybody who doesn't know the Wallace team, other than these podcasts, this guy's an amazing trialer. He's an amazing leader. And, you know, it's hard, again, being the boss and then doing improv with your team because you have to be vulnerable, and the status shift is incredible. The fact that I really admired that, and I thought it was really, really great. I hope it brought your team closer together. It really brought us closer together.
Definitely.
And thank you for, you know, including me in this. I was jelly watching all these awesome podcasts. I was like, I guess maybe I got to get a verdict against Uber for him to call me in.
Listen, the best podcast episodes we've had are with guests like you who I've known for a long time and had a good relationship with, and we're able to just sit down and have a good conversation. And
should I reveal what the secret was?
It's been great. Which secret?
This was all scripted. Hello.
Thank you, ChatGPT, for actively listening to my prompt.
No, this has been great.
Yeah.
And thank you for doing this, because I think is a great thing. There's other podcasts which are out there, but this one's very real.
Appreciate it. Yeah, well, the success of the podcast is driven by the quality of our guests, and there is no one of higher quality than Mr. Breiter. We are thrilled that you were here today. We thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And that is it for today's podcast episode. Thank you for joining in, and we hope to see you on the next one. This has been the WallaceWins.com podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brad.
Take care, folks.
Get your win at WallaceWins.com.